story is about an orphanage that raises its children exceptionally well. The girl you see crying is upset because her brother is about to leave with a new father who just arrived here. You might be wondering why this man doesn't fit the typical image of a parent you might have imagined. Well, it is because these kids receive special education, so it only makes sense if only special parents can take them under their wing. You might also be curious about what kind of special education these seemingly ordinary kids are getting. Well, you'll get your answer soon enough. As soon as the sister tells the kids to stop pretending and get ready for training, they pull out sharp blades and weapons, which are definitely not toys for poking around. The sister even tells the little girl not to let her snot dangle out of her nose while pretending to cry, because it looks gross, and she doesn't want the new parents to get a bad impression of the kids they've raised so dearly. The girl quickly owns up and hastily wipes her nose. We also meet the proud director of the orphanage, who takes major pride in this special education approach. He sees it as a real gift for these kids, because they've been trained as living, breathing weapons ever since they learned how to walk. These kids are raised with super strict supervision to make sure they meet the standards of the filthy rich. Because of this crazy attention to detail, it costs a fortune to train each child properly. Another question that might come up in your mind is what these kids are actually used for. Well, there is not any straightforward answer to this question, and the director just says they're like computers. And what they're used for is decided by the buyers, or as you might call them, the new parents. For example, this rich fat cat who has just adopted a new kid shows his new son a photo of a man and says, "This is your target. Memorize his face." The director then explains that since these kids are living weapons, they pose significant threat to the buyer. So the orphanage made sure to drill each and everyone with 3 absolute principles from a young age. These are the rules they can't disobey because they have been wired in their subconscious mind, and the orphanage calls these the 3 absolute principles, and they're crucial for keeping the kids under control. While this fat guy is drilling the boy about memorizing the photo, the kid, however, points out that there's a car tailing them closely. The old man is a bit startled to hear something he never asked. He stammers, explaining it's typical, demanding to know what the heck he's talking about, and tells him to just focus on memorizing the damn picture. The kid quickly snaps back to attention and swears to follow the orders. And there you go. That's what the first principle is all about. Absolute compliance to the parents' orders. That car tailing them smashes into them, and their car flips over from the impact. The kid scrambles out and sees his father badly hurt and barely clinging to life. And that is when we learn about the second principle these kids are drilled with. Never use your powers without your parents' permission. As the kid mourns his father, the attackers get out of their cars with their guns in hand. As they cautiously approach the flipped car, they spot the kid crying and begging for help, shouting that his dad isn't breathing. The attackers are taken aback to see this, because they had no idea that there was a kid in the car. They decide to toss the kid aside to finish up the work, but before they can, the boy whips out a knife and stabs one of them right in the throat, making him bleed like crazy, and then quickly snatches the gun from the fallen enemy. Before the other hitman even realizes what's happening, he sees the kid aiming the gun at him and gets a solid bullet right in the head, ending him with a single shot. And that's what the third rule is all about. Forget the first 2 principles and do whatever it takes to keep your parents safe. The director, on the other hand, couldn't be prouder of his children. He is practically bursting with joy and pride for raising such perfect, exceptional kids. He quickly shows the register book containing information about each and every kid and asks his buyer which one he would prefer. But the buyer flatly refuses any of them. So, the old man puts the register book back on the drawer and reluctantly pulls out a file for a kid who's already been deemed a defective product. He's disappointed that the buyer is only interested in this particular one. Apparently, this misfit kid was a real gem. Even the director is a huge fan of his. He had the best skills out of all the weapons they'd whipped up, and the old man was practically swooning over him. But of course, the kid disappeared, and the director's left wondering if he's even still breathing. They've been on a wild goose chase to find him, but since he's parentless, he can't use his powers without someone's permission. So they're pretty much in the dark because of 0 leads, and he's probably living incognito as just another regular high school kid. Well, it seems like this supposed ultimate weapon is getting pushed around by a bunch of school bullies. After taking a punch from a guy in a white hoodie, he's down for the count, writhing in agony from that one brutal hit. Guess being a top-tier weapon doesn't always mean you can handle a schoolyard smackdown. This guy Yusef with deadpan eyes hovers over our boy, asking him how many points he'd give that punch. The poor guy fumbles out, that's a solid 180,000 points right there. The other bullies in the group high-five Yusef for racking up such a high fist score. Yusef then decides he wants to play further, planning to test his kick to see how many points he can score this time. But before he can walk to our boy Hyunho once again, a blonde dude pushes this blackhead away and rushes up to Hyunho, eager to know how many points his punch can earn. Yusef doesn't appreciate getting pushed by some lowly weirdo, and even Hyunho can tell Yusef is pissed about the blonde's shove. So Yusef silently strolls over to the riled-up blondie, Cyan. When he gets there, he gives Cyan a good old slap across the face, casually saying, "Just paying you back, buddy." No hard feelings. As much as Cyan hates the humiliation of that slap, he swallows his pride and gives a thumbs up to his friend for a solid 180,000-point slap. The guy with the deadpan eyes just smiles and casually walks away, telling Cyan he can buy him a pack of cigarettes instead of flattery. Before Yusef goes, Sion challenges him, promising to fight him next time. Meanwhile, the protagonist is totally fed up with all this nonsense from these ragtag idiots because he knows he could take them all down in one fell swoop. Still, he plays the role of the dumb weakling, and Sion starts choking him, demanding to know if Yusef's punch is actually better than his. Cyan keeps on bullying our boy, treating him like his personal punching bag to vent his frustration, and tells Hyunho to tag along with him for a little while. With no way out, the boy reluctantly follows the rowdy thug and ends up footing the bill for their meal, because, well, Cyan claims he's broke, saying he's all out of cash after running errands for Yusef. Blondie then wonders aloud who would win if he fought Yusef head-on. In response, Hyunho states that he can't say anything for sure. Out of nowhere, Cyan notices the snack shop has the same name as Hyunho, and our guy sheepishly admits it's run by his mom. Right on cue, his mother also shows up and says if Cyan is her son's friend, he can eat as much as he wants. Cyan is genuinely surprised to learn that this is actually Hyunho's mother's shop, and our boy feels pretty disappointed because he had been trying to keep this a secret all along. And he's not sure why his truth had to come out at the hands of this jerk, who's shamelessly running his tongue over his lips, probably looking forward to freeload some more food. Seeing the shifty look on his filthy friend's face, Hyunho grabs his pen, ready to poke a hole in Cyan's eyes if he tries anything sneaky. Just as he's about to make his move, the blondie surprises him by apologizing for not introducing himself properly earlier. He introduces himself as Cyan Park, Hyunho's buddy, and comments that he finally gets why the shop had a weird name. Hyunho's mom chuckles at the joke and mentions that Hyunho told her to keep it under wraps. Cyan then jabs at his friend, saying he's awful at hiding things and that he's also bummed his friend kept such a stunning mom a secret. Hyunho, now totally over this guy's act, knows Cyan's just a piece of work. To avoid any more nonsense, he tells his mom they need to bounce because other friends are waiting for them. The woman packs up some food in a plastic bag and hands it to Cyan, telling him to share it with others. He explicitly and happily states that all Hyunho's friends are like her own children, so Cyan should not shy away from anything. While Hyunho tries to convince her that it's really not necessary, the blondie's eyes light up at the sight of free food. He grabs it without a second thought, completely ignoring Hyunho's internal groans. He is feeling pretty pathetic, internally begging his mom to rethink this, because he knows these guys are just a bunch of bullies, not real friends. Hyunho then pleads with Cyan not to share the food with Yusef or anyone else. Cyan agrees with a smirk and says his goodbyes. Hyunho's mom, ever the gracious host, tells Cyan to bring more friends next time, to which Cyan enthusiastically agrees, saying he'll definitely come back with a crew. Well, that's exactly what Hyunho was trying to avoid, and here we are. Once Cyan's out of sight, the boy turns to his mom and lets loose, and while fighting to keep his tears in check, he furiously demands to know why she didn't just pretend they weren't related. Seeing her son so upset, his mom is totally confused and hurt. She tells him she was just happy to meet his friend, and apologizes if she caused any trouble. Hyunho, meanwhile, is left questioning the rationality behind his words. He has no idea why he's yelling at his mom, especially when she's apologizing. He's feeling like garbage for acting out. His mom tries to explain that she just wanted him to make more friends, which is why she acted the way she did. Hyunho's hand shakes with frustration and confusion, and he's barely holding himself together. The next day at school, Hyunho sees the same tteokbokki his mom makes, sitting right before his eyes. Apparently, Yusef has figured out that Hyunho's mom runs that snack shop down the street. So, he grabbed a bowl for himself. Yusef takes a dirty rag, dips it into his bowl of tteokbokki, starts rubbing it in Hyunho's face, and complains that he found this rag in his food and demands a refund because he can't eat filth. To make matters worse, he tosses another jab, sarcastically asking if he should go directly to Hyunho's mom for the refund. Hyunho is absolutely livid with Cyan, especially after he ratted out his secret despite his pleas to keep it quiet. Trying to keep his cool, Hyunho responds coldly, asking if they're even considered friends. This gets under Yusef's skin, and he mocks Hyunho for throwing a tantrum over a little joke. Then, to add insult to injury, Yusef dumps the entire bowl of tteokbokki right onto Hyunho's uniform. That's the last straw. Hyunho's already got his pen in hand, and before Yusef can react, he doesn't hesitate to swing his hand to jab the pen straight into Yusef's throat. His hand stops just short of the mark, trembling as he fights to keep himself in check. Yusef, not exactly thrilled about being threatened, gets more cocky and pissed off, demanding to know what the hell Hyunho thinks he's doing. A few moments later, Cyan strolls into the classroom, only to find everyone dead silent. The place is a mess. Security guards are on the scene, the window has been shattered, blood is splattered across the floor, and Hyunho's glasses are scattered on the ground. Looks like things have taken a serious turn, either an accident or, dare I say, an attempt of murder, attempted by Yusef. You see, just a moment ago, Hyunho was mercilessly beaten by this jerk, for about 15 minutes straight. He begged for mercy, draped in his own blood, and lost consciousness several times while writhing in pain. Despite his pleas, Yusef didn't stop and continued the relentless beating. When Hyunho was completely worn out and shattered from the brutal assault, he looked outside through the nearby window and finally ended it by jumping out of it. Now, we find ourselves in an abandoned building where we encounter this disgusting creature again. With no shred of empathy, he casually puffs on his cigarette and tells his friends to confess that they were the ones who accidentally pushed Hyunho out of the window while playing around. His friends are pretty reluctant to take the blame. In fact, they refuse right away to Yusef because they don't want to get into trouble. That's when Yusef brings up a useful Korean law known as the juvenile offender law. He explains that he's no longer eligible for this because he's past the age limit, so he's asking his friends to help him out by confessing that they were the ones who pushed Hyunho out of the window. He insists that this is the only way he can avoid a trip to jail. Still, the other boys are hesitant and remind him that even if they take the blame, they'll be hit with a civil lawsuit. Yusef just shrugs it off, saying he's got that covered too. He then points out that the civil lawsuit hasn't been filed yet, and if they eliminate Hyunho's only surviving family member, his mother, there will be no one left to file the lawsuit. Yusef also brings a suitcase full of hard cash, offering 10 million won per person in exchange for their help. Once everything's figured out, they decide to pay a visit that night to the grieving mother, who's still trying to cope with the loss of her son. She's sitting in her son's room, surrounded by his things, lost in her grief. As midnight strikes, the thugs quickly put on their masks and head straight for the 5th floor. But when they try to use the elevator, they find it's out of order. So they opt for the traditional staircase. As they make their way up, they discover that the elevator is jammed because someone has intentionally wedged it with a fire extinguisher, preventing it from coming back down. Before Yusef can even figure out who might have done this, they hear a familiar voice. Apparently, Sion is sitting on the staircase, already waiting for them to arrive. Yusef quickly asks what the hell he's doing there, while the other lackey is just thrilled to see him and tells him to join them. Sion gets up from his seat, ready to dive into action, but not before asking 2 important questions. First, he wants to know how they found out about Hyunho's Taeokboki place, which was a hidden gem only he knew about. Yusef casually pulls down his mask and explains that when Sion didn't bring the cigarettes he was supposed to, Yusef followed him and saw him hanging out with the neighborhood kids. That's when he spotted Hyunho arguing with his mother. Sion realizes that it was actually because of him that these thugs found out about the place. He then moves on to his second question and tells Yusef to think carefully before answering. He wants to know why they're really here. That's when Yusef flexes his big iron pipe and tells Sion they're just here to handle things with Hyunho's mother, to keep her from filing a lawsuit and let her sleep peacefully. He's actually glad Sion's here too, because he's been getting on his nerves lately. Yusef reminds him about the push from earlier and figures out that Sion was just pretending to bully Hyunho, and in reality, he was trying to protect him the whole time. Yusef admits he was too dense to see it sooner and was itching to take care of Sion as well. With that, Sion is done with the interrogation. He picks up the fire extinguisher and Yusef doesn't hesitate to swing his giant rod. Sion quickly pulls the pin from the extinguisher, aims it at Yusef, and starts blasting him with all the bubbly gas. As their vision blurs, one of the lackeys catches a glimpse of an extinguisher heading straight for his face. Before he knows it, the red tank smacks him right on the noggin, and the impact also sends Yusef sprawling to the ground too. Sion quickly shoves his buddy off, grabs the rod again while Sion handles the other 2 lackeys. When he sees Yusef making a move, he blocks the iron rod with the extinguisher like a pro. In a flash, he ducks down and slams the extinguisher onto Yusef's feet, smashing his toes into oblivion. Sion then boots him over the stairs, sending him tumbling backward. He then starts trolling down the stairs, while casually informing Yusef that his cuneiform bone above the metatarsal is broken, and he's pretty sure this arrogant bastard won't be walking anytime soon with those messed up legs. The filthy man groans in pain, lying defenseless on the ground, and shakily asks why Sion is doing this to him. That's when Sion drops the bombshell. He explains that there are 3 principles that were drilled into his mind as a kid. First, a parent's word is absolute. Second, don't use violence without permission. As he says this, he lands a devastating punch right on the guy's head. The other lackeys on the ground are totally lost, not understanding a word of this crazy rant. It's pretty wild that we were led to think Hyunho, the whiny kid with glasses, was the main character. Turns out, Sion is actually the missing kid from the orphanage. After losing several teeth and with a broken nose, Yusef begs for forgiveness and pleads for Sion to stop. But our boy keeps going, explaining that the third principle is, if there's a threat to the parent's safety, the kid can ignore the first two rules and handle the situation however necessary to keep the parents safe. Sayan remembers Hyunho's mother saying that all of Hyunho's friends are like her own children. So, basically, she's his mother now. And if anyone threatens his mother, he's got the green light to beat them to a pulp. With a resounding bang, Sayan smashes that filthy bastard's skull, and the sound echoes through the building. The scene cuts back to the creepy orphanage, where a sister is visiting the director. She tells him there's a call from Korea. When the man asks who it is, she says it's the Baeko personnel. The old man's mind perks up as he recognizes the caller and quickly grabs the phone. The caller quickly reports that they've found the kid they've been hunting for, the legendary figure from the Dead Mansion project, codenamed Sean. Apparently, he's in Korea right now. And there you have it, the official introduction of our boy. The orphanage, which is known as Dead Mansion, is a highly funded multinational organization that produces weapons for the rich. In the eyes of the orphanage, he was the perfect child, and his code name is Sean Park Sion. They had us fooled in the first half, not gonna lie. I really thought the black-haired guy was the real MC. Here's the scoop on our boy's backstory. Sean was one of the children created by the Dead Mansion project. He was the pinnacle of their product they had produced so far. He was top-notch in infiltration, weapon skills, and VIP assassination. He was meant to be supplied to a top client of the orphanage, a notorious Yakuza organization in Japan. But there was a mix-up, and instead of Japan, he ended up in Korea. The director explains that it's been 5 years since that mishap, and he had almost thought Sean was dead, so they gave up on him. But now, this guy, who looks more like a filthy rich mafia boss than a father, is thrilled they've found him. He quickly tells the sister to bring Sean back as soon as possible, by any means necessary, because he can't wait any longer. The woman, whom we've been calling Sister, lets down her black veil, revealing her dead eyes. She quickly adheres to the order, saying she will proceed with the retrieval operation immediately, and this lady in question goes by the name Rachel. As soon as she drops her act as Sister, my God, this woman looks absolutely creepy. Dressed in a tight black shiny suit, she's not holding back a single bit in flexing her big guns. She makes it clear that she will drag Sion back even if she has to take him out by force. This woman is the Dead Mansion instructor, and her specialty is still unknown. However, the director quickly tells her to simmer down because he needs Sion unharmed, and she doesn't need those guns either. The lady quickly gets embarrassed and starts picking up her robe to put it back on, muttering about how she was just getting into character. In the next scene, we see Kwon Byung-woo, Yusef's father, bowing his head to apologize to Hyunho's mother. He promises to cover all medical expenses, mental damages, and any other compensation she might need. But the woman flat out states that nothing will change with just an apology because this isn't something that can be resolved with words alone. The students nearby are startled to see this filthy rich man bowing his head like this. And Kwon Byung-woo finally lifts his head, turns around with a blank face, saying he will be taking his leave. The woman is utterly baffled by his strange behavior. In response, Kwon Byung-woo covers his face with a handkerchief and reveals that he was here to make amends. But since they can't resolve anything through discussion, he will leave because efficiency is key in all matters. He then walks forward towards his luxurious Maybach, telling the woman that he also knows other ways to sort out this mess because he's quite the expert in these matters. With those parting words, his car zooms off. He then complains to his manager about how disgustingly stingy and smelly that place was, insisting they tear it all down and build a mixed-use complex instead. The rich man then asks about Sion, or we can also call him Sean, and asks his manager if they have taken care of that kid. The manager lets him know their people are already en route and the secretary will ring them once the job's done. Kwon Byung-woo just nods and heads to Sanlim University Seongsim Hospital. Inside, we find Yusef all banged up, wrapped in bandages like a mummy. He tells his dad the kid who messed him up was no average Joe. He kept rambling about some 3 engraved principles or something. His dad raises an eyebrow, asking if this is the new trend among kids. Yusef just shakes his head, saying he hasn't a clue. Before Yusef can spill more, his dad cuts him off and gives a cold stare to the women and humbly requests the nurse to give them some alone time. Once the lady is out of the way, he slaps his son hard right over his face, just like any typical father. After slapping Yusef's face, Byung-woo lets him have it. apart along with that father. So he's doing exactly what he's been told. He grabs a tablecloth and, before the ragtag crew can get close, uses it as a distraction. He throws the table right at their faces, crushing them under its weight and leaving them screaming their lungs out. Just then, a knife flies in from behind, but he ducks quickly, and the knife hits one of the black-suited guys in front instead. The one who just threw the dagger seems like the same guy with the black gloves, and he's pretty impressed with Sean's reflexes. He's also surprised to see that the arm he broke is still working. Before he can finish playing around with those gloves, Sean grabs the guy's hand and slaps him hard across the face. He expertly locks the guy's arm and snaps the bone inside, coolly telling him, "That's how you break an arm." As the cocky guy sprawls on the ground, a bullet zips past Sean's face, grazing him closely. The shooter is Byung-woo, standing on the first floor, looking disappointed for missing his shot. Sean quickly raises his hand and calls out that it's tough to hit from that distance unless you're a real pro. Byung-woo curiously asks who this kid is. He remembers that Korean kids these days are into something called crew, so he asks if Sean is part of that too. To which Sean responds that he doesn't know what the heck that crew thing means. But if Byung is asking which crew he belongs to, then he proudly states that he is with the Hyunho snack shop. The mention of Hyunho snacks rings a bell for the zombie-like dude, and promptly asks if Sean is talking about that smelly alleyway junk food place. With a sneer, the man shoves the gun barrel right between Sean's eyes and asks if the woman tipped him off to kill him. Sean smirks and says he's absolutely wrong, because all she did was tell him to tear and crush everyone. While the zombie is trying to figure out what the heck Sean is saying, my guy moves with lightning speed, knocks the gun away, and gives the guy a solid slap. That one slap was enough to scramble Byung-woo's brain, and with Sean's final punch, the dude hits the ground, and his face is a bloody mess, nose and mouth bleeding from the impact. Sean makes it clear he's not here to assist anyone, he's just following his parents' absolute commands. With that, he turns to walk away while the guy on the ground keeps ranting about how he should have taken Sean out when he had the chance, and regrets not sticking to his own motto of leaving no work unfinished. Sean grabs the gun, aims it up at the chandelier, and tells the guy to stop blabbering about pointless stuff. He fires, and the chandelier starts to fall, crashing down and crushing the man just as the mother wished for. Sean walks away, shaking his head and muttering how both the father and son are really just the same. We're back in the hospital, where the nurse asks Yusef if he's feeling any better. The arrogant guy just scoffs and asks why he'd be here if he was doing well. The nurse comments that she's heard school violence can be pretty intense these days, but she's never seen anyone as badly hurt as him before. She wonders if the kid who hit him must have been a real expert, though even for high schoolers, this is pretty extreme. As she squats down to pick up her things, we get a glimpse of her giant ass. Man, we already know that the Russians are thick as hell, but this is something next level. She then grabs the injection and asks Yusef what he was discussing with his father earlier about some 3 principles. Noticing the weird color of the injection, Yusef questions what the heck she's injecting him with. Rachel then pulls out her mask and reassures him not to worry, saying that as long as she only uses half, he won't die. It looks like she's finally here to take our guy, and she starts pressing against his chest, grilling him about those 3 absolute principles he mentioned. The guy gets genuinely scared by her death glare and tells her to just get the hell out. That's when Rachel pulls off her fake hair and stops playing games. She straightforwardly demands he reveal the name of the kid who messed him up like that. We also find out her specialties, which are disguise, infiltration, interrogation, and of course, torture. Shortly after, Rachel calls the director when she arrives at Byung-woo's company. She tells him that the boy apparently used his powers. The director is shocked by this news, and Rachel further explains that she rushed to the spot where Sean was last reported. But by the time she got there, he was already gone. The place was a mess, with people badly injured, something only Sean's powers could have caused. The director is confused, saying he has no idea what's going on, because in the history of the Dead Mansion, no one has gone against the absolute 3 principles. The old man walks over to a cupboard, and as he opens it, a deluge of books spills out. He remarks that if Sean is ignoring the absolute 3 principles, it's no ordinary matter anymore. The weapons the Dead Mansion sold off could bypass these principles and target the Dead Mansion itself. He instructs her that her mission has changed, and she must ensure that if Sean is disregarding the principles, she'll need to take action. To which Rachel quickly agrees, and the director also mentions that if she needs support in Korea, she can contact the Baeko personnel there. Just then, 2 men show up right on cue. They're pretty amazed that a single high schooler managed to take them all down. Rachel hangs up, and one of the guys, particularly the fat one, looks a bit freaked out by her appearance and wonders if kids nowadays really dress like that. His buddy explains that she's Russian and that some people are pretty open-minded, adding that even his own wife is open-minded. The next day, we're back at school, and it looks like Rachel has taken on the fake role of a teacher at the school where Sean is studying. She's here to dig deeper into what Sean's up to, and just thinking about it gets her all worked up. She's excited to see how he's grown up. Back in the day, Shawn was her favorite student. He absorbed everything she taught him like a sponge. So, she's really looking forward to seeing him again. When she arrives outside the classroom, she spots Shawn. He's in the middle of narrating the story of how Yusuf was begging for mercy after he beat the crap out of him. Rachel is completely taken aback by his behavior, and she is having a hard time accepting if this vulgar kid really is Shawn. Suddenly, a chubby kid sitting behind Shawn gets really pissed off and finally wakes up because of Shawn's nonstop rambling. They both start getting cocky with each other, and Rachel wonders if they've already figured out who's boss. She remembers how at Dead Mansion, they had this annual event where the kids fought to measure their combat power and determine who was on top. It was so cute when they challenged her, and Shawn was always the strongest among them. But now, Shawn looks like he's getting his butt handed to him by this big guy, making Rachel seriously question his status as the strongest. The chubby kid keeps kicking and thrashing Shawn like he's just a sack of potatoes, and Shawn just takes the beating head on. Rachel's face quickly shifts to a blank poker face, watching this once mighty kid get pummeled like a fool. After a bit of watching, Rachel starts to figure out that Shawn probably didn't use his powers because he's hiding his true identity. This makes her think he might still be under the control of the three principals, but she's not entirely sure and wants to keep an eye on him. She can see his sharp, sophisticated eyes. The good kids from Dead Mansion should have both physical strength and brains, and Shawn always stood out. Even if he's hiding his power, his smarts still shine through. As his former teacher, she's a bit troubled that he can't disguise himself properly and thinks about teaching him again when she gets the chance. While Shawn is busy doodling the moment he smacked Yusuf with that fire extinguisher, Rachel gets confused. She thought he was focusing on studying with such concentration, but he's just messing around. So, she gives him a heavy book slam right on his head. In the bathroom, Rachel sits with her head spinning in confusion. She's sure Shawn can't possibly be this foolish and starts to think maybe this is someone else who just looks like him. It's hard for her to accept that he might really be this clueless. She decides to change her plans. It's no longer just about the three principals, now she needs to figure out if this guy is really codenamed Shawn. After class, Shawn's head is throbbing. He remembers the teacher usually doesn't hit that hard. Meanwhile, Rachel, now dressed as a student, comes over. But then he hears a familiar voice. After turning around, he sees Hyunho's mother standing there. She's relieved to see him, especially since her bags are weighing her down, and she tells him to please carry them for her. Shawn quickly proceeds to carry the bags as commanded. When they hit the snack shop, Shawn devours his food like a wild animal. The mother tells him to slow down, and he quietly takes her advice. Rachel starts piecing things together. She figures out that Yusuf is the one who knocked out this woman's son, but she's still not sure about Shawn's connection to them. After seeing him eat like this, she's fuming that Shawn is just as vulgar as she suspected and is itching to tear this Shawn imposter apart. As soon as Rachel takes a bite of her food, she gets a chill and her tongue practically hangs out. She asks for some water after just one bite of the insanely spicy dish. The woman quickly hands over the water and asks if she can't handle the heat. Rachel is stunned, wondering how these folks can torture themselves with such fiery food. She is pretty sure these Koreans are out to assassinate her with this much heat. Shawn then tells her to slow down, saying she's being clumsy. That's it. Her frustration has hit the roof, and she vows to take this jerk down. Speaking of spice, she remembers Shawn couldn't handle it either. If this guy is really Shawn, he should be struggling with all this heat, just like he did back in Russia. She watches his trembling hand, thinking he's having a tough time. But instead, he's giving thumbs up after thumbs up to the lady, raving about how delicious the food is. The woman is happy and keeps feeding him. Rachel realizes he's actually handling all that spice like a pro. She is confused, wondering why he's chowing down on this fiery food like a fool instead of refuting to eating it. Rachel then remembers that Shawn helped this woman carry bags with just her one command, and now he's eating without refusing her and helping her with everything she asks for, as if he's following her every command. Seems like she's finally pieced it together. He also would not have killed all those people so skillfully without any commands, and she's sure he was ordered to destroy the Byung-woo construction purposefully. The only person who seems likely to give such orders is the woman he's with. After connecting the dots, Rachel decides to test her theory to see if this woman is really the one commanding Shawn. She pays the bill for her food, and while the mother turns to grab some spare change, Rachel sees her chance. She grabs a chopstick and throws it toward the woman. Just as she hoped, Shawn leaps from his seat, intercepts the chopstick midair, and grabs the woman by her face. The stool nearby tips over as they quickly vanish. When the mother turns around, both of them are gone. When we finally see them, Rachel can't contain her excitement after realizing that it's definitely Shawn. On the other hand, it does not take long for our boy to figure out who she is, telling her to drop the act and stop tailing him like that. Rachel greets him officially and asks why he's hanging out with that woman and why he is following her orders like she's his mom. She is sure that there's no way a rundown snack shop owner could be connected to a top kid from Dead Mansion. Shaun stays tight-lipped, so Rachel decides to take action. She grabs his hand, launches him into the air, and slams him down to the ground like a sack of potatoes. I can tell the impact was pretty rough, judging by his groans of pain. Rachel then tells him to stop messing around. It's time for him to get back to the orphanage, because there's a whole line of clients waiting for him. Suddenly, Shaun's mind flashes back to the painful memories which had been buried in his mind. He is standing in the middle of knocked-out kids, and he's probably the one who left them out cold during their training. There is also this mysterious woman who gave him the name Park Cyan, but he can't seem to remember her. In a sudden burst of shock, Shaun blurts out and asks Rachel who this woman in his memories is. Rachel is confused by his random question, but before she can respond, Shaun smashes his head into her nose, pushes her away, and gets back on his feet. As she pushes the blood out of her nose, her fury flares up. She demands to know if he really doesn't want to come back without a fight. But before she can make a move, Shaun has already run away. He's sprinting across the rooftops, blown away that they sent Rachel after him. The image of the bloodied woman keeps flashing in his mind, and he's determined to figure out who she is, haunting his memories. Back at the Dead Mansion, the director is having a full-on meltdown over the news that Shaun managed to escape. Rachel apologizes, saying he slipped away while she was momentarily distracted. But she also brings some good news. They've tracked down the old woman who's controlling Shaun with the 3 principles. Turns out she's the one Shaun recognizes as his parent. The director is thrown for a loop. How can an old woman be perceived as a parent? He asks Rachel if the old lady is intentionally using the 3 principles, but Rachel admits she can't be sure yet, and more investigation is needed before jumping to conclusions. The director decides it's best to verify things with the old woman before sending more resources after Shaun. After a wardrobe change, Rachel steps out of the bathroom in this old lady disguise, leaving this other old woman confused, who can bet her life that she just had seen a young girl enter the restroom earlier. Meanwhile, the director is busy explaining to us that there are only 2 ways to retrieve a good child from their parents, and we'll learn about the first method soon enough. Back with Hyunho's mother, she is taken aback by the appearance of this elegant old lady. Rachel, under the disguise, sternly advises her to keep her distance from Shaun. She introduces herself as Shaun's mother, noting that she's often busy with business trips and hasn't paid much attention to her child. Now she's all dramatic about how it breaks her heart that Shaun's been eating such awful spicy food. Hyunho's mother suddenly realizes that Shaun can't handle spicy food and feels a bit of guilt for making him eat it all this time. It's a harsh wake-up call that she's been feeding him stuff that's clearly not good for him. Rachel is grinning inside, thrilled that this old hag is finally feeling some guilt. This is exactly the kind of reaction she was hoping for. You see, by getting the parent to voluntarily give up custody of the child is the first way to take a child back from the parent. And this is what Rachel is trying to achieve. So, she keeps her smooth talk, saying she understands that Shaun listens to Hyunho's mother. So, Rachel tells her that when Shaun comes back to eat here, she should sternly tell him never to return and go back home. It's a dirty play on Rachel's part, but it's all part of the plan. If Hyunho's mother tells Shaun to go home, he'll take it as an order and head straight back to the Dead Mansion. Rachel starts to leave, but Hyunho's mother surprises everyone by refusing to say what Rachel suggested. Looks like Rachel's plan isn't going as smoothly as she hoped. Hyunho's mother speaks up, and it's a gut punch to Rachel's plan. She asks Rachel if she's even paid attention to her own son. She reveals that Shaun is always covered in filth and dirt, and whenever she asks him about it, he just always says he fell. At first, she used to think he was just being a rebellious kid, but now it breaks her heart. It's clear to her that Shaun needs someone who truly cares for him, unlike this rich woman who's clearly abandoned him. As she cries, she admits that she's come to care about Shaun and doesn't want him to end up like Hyunho. She's willing to step up and take care of him since there's no one else around. Rachel clearly gets ticked off to hear this, and tries to tear into the old woman. But Hyunho's mom just bows her head and apologizes, saying she didn't mean to come off as rude. She's determined to keep an eye on Shaun, no matter what. Seems like Rachel's first plan to snag Shaun's ownership didn't go as smoothly as she'd hoped, and she's fuming. As night falls, she calls up the director and spills the beans about the failed attempt. The director seems disappointed to hear this, and he is clearly running out of patience. So, he gave her the green light to proceed with the second method. Rachel, now fully on board with this plan, eagerly agrees and looks forward to putting it into action. With a determined look, she sheds her garments to reveal a more wild side of herself, signaling that things are about to get serious. It turns out that, upon the death of the parent, the child reverts to the ownership of the Dead Mansion. So, her new target is Hyunho's mother. The scene shifts to outside a mart, where Hyunho's mother is seen shopping for groceries for her shop. And we can also see Rachel lurking in the shadows. She waits for the perfect moment, her finger poised over the detonate button of a bomb. When she decides it's time, she presses it, and the explosion rips through the air. The fire alarms blare and sprinklers kick on, dousing everything in water. But the blast wasn't aimed at Hyunho's mom, because it was merely a diversion. As Rachel's gun comes into view, she takes her aim. Just as she pulls the trigger, Shaun swoops in, wielding a pan like a makeshift shield, and the bullet ricochets off his impromptu defense. Shaun's face is etched with annoyance, while Rachel appears to be having the time of her life. Shaun is amazed to see that the bullet-blocking move he picked up from a game actually worked in real life. He then drops the pan and strides toward Rachel, looking clearly annoyed by her actions. Like, he already knew that she would do something like this, but he reminds her that involving guns and bombs into the mix is just way too much. Rachel just smirks, her gun still aimed at the mother. Shaun reacts quickly and shoves the shelf she was hiding behind. But the girl quickly bolts away before that shelf crashes over her. He then takes her by surprise and quickly disarms her with just one kick at her hand. But this girl is not messing around, and she quickly pulls out a dagger and swings at him, slashing his belly. Blood splatters to the ground, or so it seems. In reality, it was just a tomato ketchup tin our boy was holding that got punctured in the process. Shaun tosses the ketchup tin away, making her lose her last weapon. He quickly tries to smash her with his knee, but she ducks and shoves his feet, sending him crashing into the shelves. She then asks him if he seriously thinks he can take her teacher down like this. She says she wanted to bring him back unharmed, but it looks like that's not an option anymore. Meanwhile, the mother is still trying to figure out what's going on, and that's when she spots a little kid stuck in the chaos, crying his eyes out. Amid all the commotion, he's sobbing for his mom. The woman rushes over, asking if he's hurt. The tearful kid just says he wants to go back to his mom. He asks her to help him get out of there, but it turns out this little punk is holding a sharp knife. No surprise if he's one of those specially trained kids here to assist Rachel to assassinate her. Back to the senior-junior showdown. She pulls out another knife and tries to hit him, but he jumps out of the way. She goes for another slash, but he ducks and avoids her. He grabs her hand, and she tells him to stop resisting because they're just trying to free him from everyone's control. Just then, he gets momentarily distracted, and Rachel seizes the moment. She pulls her hand free and swings her dagger at his face, slicing his cheek with deadly accuracy. He stumbles but quickly gets his footing. He grabs 2 cans from a nearby shelf and chucks them at her face, but she just knocks them away and tells him to let the old hag die. If he does, he can head back to the dead mansion whenever he wants. Shaun then grabs a packet of flour and throws it right at her face. She makes the dumb mistake of slashing at the flour packet, sending it floating through the air and blocking her view. While struggling to breathe through the flour, she doesn't notice the scissors coming her way. Thanks to her quick reflexes, she narrowly avoids a serious cut, ending up with just a small mark on her face and her hair slightly trimmed. She quickly steps back, but Shaun takes another swing at her. She drops to the floor, and with a crazy grin, she gets back up and comes at him with her blades. Their strengths seem pretty evenly matched. Or maybe he's just better than his teacher now. Before she can figure out her next move, he grabs her hand and shoves her into a grocery cart, leaving her stuck inside like a little kid. Shaun gives her a cold stare and asks if she has learned her lesson, but the woman just grunts in frustration. Shaun tells her to leave him and his mother alone, then kicks her cart forward, leaving her slamming into the other carts lined up, and he quickly locks her cart with the rest. With a smirk, he tells her to enjoy herself and walks off, leaving her stuck and grumbling. Back to the little maniac kid, he sees his chance and swings his dagger at her chest while she's looking away. But Shaun swoops in just in time, leaving the little kid stunned right there. The mother's confused, wondering why he's here when he should be at school and why his clothes are all messed up. Meanwhile, the kid on the ground recognizes Shaun as the legend of the dead mansion and figures that if Shaun's here, Rachel must have already been beaten by him. The woman explains that this little guy has lost his mother. Shaun asks the kid for his parents' phone number, but the kid acts clueless and starts fake crying as he runs toward Hyunho's mother. Shaun quickly grabs him, lifts him up, and tells him to stop whining. He then gets close to the kid's ear and asks him if he hasn't learned that sticking out too much just makes people dislike you. He further playfully threatens the kid with some cryptic talk and gives him a little slap, making the dagger the kid was holding drop. Shaun quickly steps on the dagger to hide it, and that one slap was enough to knock the kid out cold. After that little showdown, we're back at the dead mansion. The director wakes up in the middle of the night because of an unexpected phone call. Grumbling, he throws on his gown and heads to the phone, hoping for some good news to make this early wake-up worth it. When he hears the caller's voice, a smile spreads across his face as he recognizes it's Shaun on the line. He asks the old man if he really thought he could catch him with just Rachel and that little kid, Eugene. The old man's face quickly goes pale as he asks if Rachel is dead. Shaun doesn't give him a direct answer, just says that no matter how many people he sends, the result will be the same. He can send as many as he wants, but it won't change a thing. The old man gets really worked up when he hears Shaun is taking on the entire dead mansion instead of running away. Shaun makes it clear that if there's a threat to the parents' safety, he'll handle it based on the third principle. He's more than ready to stick to the rules because he sees the dead mansion as a real threat and will react accordingly. The old man, now on the ground and naked, breaks into a wide grin and starts laughing maniacally. He's overjoyed to see that the kid he raised is surpassing his expectations and thinks of Sean as a divine gift, perfectly following the 3 principles. He wishes Sean good luck and tells him to send the little kid back, promising not to attack the lady if Sean does that. Sean then tells the old man to call Rachel back, and the director just gets even more excited. Can't wait to meet Sean face to face. Sean tells Eugene to wake the hell up. As soon as this little brat opens his eyes, he goes on high alert. Sean informs him that he's already taken away all the weapons he was hiding, so he should save his breath instead of looking for them. He further tells the kid to eat the food since he hasn't had anything to eat. Eugene hesitates at first, but soon devours all the food in no time. Once they start heading out, Sean asks if he liked the food. But this moody brat replies, "Not really." Sean cheekily points out that if he didn't like it, he wouldn't have chowed down like a wild dog. While they're bantering, Rachel finally shows up and looks relieved to see that the kid is alive. Rachel quickly calls the kid over and he meekly walks toward her. Sean tells Rachel to take the food and make sure to fill her belly too. But this woman gives him a cold look, saying he shouldn't act so cool and chill because she hasn't given up on him yet. She walks off, saying they'll meet again soon. Rachel then starts scolding the little kid, asking why an annoying brat like him couldn't take down the old woman. Eugene apologizes for failing, and Rachel, annoyed, dismisses him. She tells him that useless brats like him should have been dealt with a long time ago. Her words make the kid shiver, and he apologizes again. Just then, Sean calls out to the kid from behind, asking if the tteokbokki he ate was tasty, and he is asking this for one last time, so he better question wisely. The kid tilts his head and, with tears streaming down his face, he says it was tasty. That's all Sean wanted to hear, and he wastes no time telling Eugene they're going back to Hyunho's snack bar to taste this delicious delight once again. Before we dive further into the story, here's a quick rundown of Eugene's past. As you might already know, the ownership of the children from the dead mansion belongs to the buyers, or parents. If these parents die, ownership reverts back to the dead mansion. Eugene had been adopted multiple times, but each time his parents died. This cycle continued, and after yet another return due to the death of his latest owner, the director was disappointed and muttered about how many times it had happened. The boy quickly responded that it was the 4th time, but the old man snapped that he didn't ask for an answer. The director then stated they would continue to profit by sending Eugene to new families, but failing to keep his parents alive 4 times was the worst disgrace in the history of the dead mansion. He didn't shy away from reminding Eugene that if this continued, they would have no choice but to dispose of him. The old man asks the kid if he knows what happens to children who get disposed of. With those little graves behind him, the kid can pretty much guess what's coming. The old man tells him he'll need to become someone important. He's got one last shot. Go to Korea and help Rachel get Sean. If he screws this up too, he's definitely done for. In the present moment, Rachel coldly reminds him that, right now, he's already considered disposed of. Freaked out and desperate to prove himself, the kid begs for another chance. Rachel just gives him an icy stare. While the kid is freaking out because of what's coming, Sean steps in to save the kid. He asks if he wants to enjoy some delicious food again. The crummy woman jumps at the chance and tells the little kid that he's been given one last shot and he has to kill that old woman. Hearing this, the kid is on the verge of tears. Realizing he's been granted a final chance to prove himself, he starts crying and quickly says the food was delicious. So, while we thought this crummy little brat was just thrilled because Sean wanted to free him, it turns out he's actually just grateful for another shot at redemption. On the other hand, Sean cracks his wrists, ready to take the kid back to the snack shop. Rachel can tell that he still sees her as a threat to the parent, so she's sure he's prepared to fight if necessary. Even though she would happily hand Eugene over, Rachel gets dramatic, asking why Sean is taking him after promising to let them go if they spared the old woman. Sean simply shrugs and says the kid wants to stay himself, and since he finds the food delicious, he has no choice but to take him with him. She finally resigns, and decides to let Eugene go with Sean. Before the little kid heads over to Sean, Rachel cryptically reminds him that this is his last chance and he better make it worthwhile. With that, the kid quickly walks over to Sean. Rachel then points out that since he's keeping the child and breaking his promise to let them leave, she declares that she'll also break her promise, and will always look for a chance to attack the old lady. Sean simply grabs the brat's hand and tells Rachel to do as she wishes. He adds that he won't hesitate to break her into pieces over and over again if she tries. Later, we're back at Hyunho's house. Sean pretends to yell at the little boy in front of Hyunho's mother. The woman quickly tells him to calm down and reminds him that he's the one who decided to look after the kid for the day. The boy admits it, but adds he doesn't want any more freeloaders crashing at her place for free food. The woman says she's perfectly fine with that. She also finds it interesting that this kid's mother is friends with Sean's mother. It turns out the truth isn't far off, as Sean's mother and this little brat are actually the same Rachel in disguise. The lady offers for them to stay, but Sean says it's not necessary. However, the little brat quickly thanks the woman, saying he'll be under her care from now on. Well, he can't let this opportunity slip because he wants to take her out at all costs. He then introduces himself as Eugene. Meanwhile, Sean is feeling a bit overwhelmed, as this is his first time at Hyunho's house. Sean asks if the room over there belongs to Hyunho, and she says it does. He asks if he can go inside, and the mother gives him the go-ahead. Sean walks into the room and finds it pretty ordinary, like something out of a drama or movie. It's the kind of room that feels like a moderately happy family lives there, with a vibe of everyday life and comfort. The room gives off a sense of warmth and normalcy that Sean has always longed for. It's the kind of typical family space he wished he could have been part of. He thinks Hyunho should have been here, living a happy, normal life, rather than being caught up in all the chaos. Once the brat finishes his meal, he thanks the lady and compliments her, saying everything was perfect, especially the omelet. The woman is pleased with the compliment. Then, the kid asks if he can ask her a question, and she agrees. He asks if, besides her son, there's any other family member living here, like a father. The woman is a bit caught off guard by the question and isn't sure how to respond. She tries to keep it light and says that unfortunately, her husband was needed so much in heaven that she had to let him go. The kid asks if he became a family member in heaven, to which the lady says that's pretty much it. Then, the kid points out that her son hasn't gone to heaven and hasn't returned home either. The woman is puzzled by this strange response. The kid continues, saying that a weak, useless child can't become family anywhere. The woman looks even more confused. The boy explains that a family is about fulfilling others' needs and proving one's worth to its members. Otherwise, they're just obstacles consuming resources, like her son who's in the hospital and unable to do anything. The lady is really pissed off and jumps up, saying that's completely wrong because that's not what a family is. The kid curiously asks what a family is then. But before she can answer, Sean playfully grabs the kid from behind and starts dragging him, asking if they can sleep in the living room. The woman agrees and mentions that Hyunho's room is empty, but Sean states that he can sleep in the living room over the sofas and the kid will just sleep on the floor. The mother's eyes warm up at their playful sight. As midnight strikes, we see Eugene's face is set in a scowl. It's clear that his displeasure stems from the fact that Sean is making him sleep over on the floor. He then notices light coming from Hyunho's room and decides to check it out. As he peeks inside, he sees the old woman sitting in a chair, looking at her son's photo. Eugene finds it odd that this woman calls her useless child a family, and even welcomes strangers like him as a family, whom she has never met before. He reflects on his own life, where a child's worth is measured by what they can produce for the family. He can't understand how being a so-called useless child can be considered family. Eugene quickly grabs the gun, aiming it at the old woman with trembling hands. He's desperate to prove his worth and become a necessary family member, believing that killing her is the only way to do it. But despite his determination, he just stands there, unable to pull the trigger. Sean quietly closes the door in front of him, and sternly asks if this is really what Eugene wants to do. Eugene's hands shake as he looks at Sean and admits he's just following orders. He then quickly turns the gun on our boy, telling him not to interfere. As he pulls the trigger, no bullet fires. Seeing this, Eugene looks puzzled, wondering why the gun is empty. Sean then scatters all those bullets down on the ground and reveals that he had already taken all the bullets away while Eugene was sleeping. He also knows that Rachel was the one who gave him the gun. Sean gives this brat death glares and extends his hand to grab the gun, pointing out that it's a 15-round 9mm parabellum that weighs 112.5 grams. He says the kid should have noticed the magazine was empty when he held the gun, and reminds him he's still just an amateur. Annoyed by the remark, the brat grabs his blade and tries to swing it at Sean. But he ends up pinned to the door by Sean, and as he turns the handle, the door swings open, sending them both crashing into the room. The little one quickly gets to his feet. Fortunately, the mother is still asleep at her desk and hasn't noticed the commotion. Sean gestures to the brat to keep quiet. But the little brat sees an opportunity and rushes forward. Sean quickly grabs that tie nearby, traps Eugene's feet with it, and makes him fall. But the kid manages to swing his blade and cut the tie almost immediately. Sean tells the kid to be a good little boy, but the kid's too stubborn. He leaps at Sean, trying to slash him with his tiny daggers. They go at it like two hyper ninjas, and it's clear Sean's holding back. This just makes Eugene even more furious, and he swings his dagger again, insisting Sean face him properly. Sean agrees, and before Eugene knows it, Sean has taken the dagger from his hand. The brat, frustrated, throws his other dagger at the lady, but Sean deflects it easily. He then pushes Eugene's feet against his own, causing him to fall. To keep the noise down, Sean quickly grabs the kid by his shirt before he hits the ground. Sean tells him with a smirk that he hasn't even started, and yet the brat is already down. But the little one just smiles in response, thrilled to be fighting the legendary figure from the dead mansion. Just as Shaun is holding him, the mother slams a book over his head with a fury that could only come from the most dangerous person on the planet. She's absolutely livid that Shaun is picking a fight with a little kid. Our boy quickly tries to reassure the angry mother that this isn't what it looks like. Meanwhile, the little brat grabs the dagger from the ground, seizing the opportunity to strike. Shaun gives him a death glare and tells him to stop. Then, Shaun quickly grabs the little one by the shoulders, reassuring the mother that they're just buddies having a morning exercise session and that the dagger is just a toy. Seems like this little one is still fixated on killing the woman, but realizes he won't get any chance while Shaun is around, so he starts to think of a sneakier approach to get the job done. The lady turns to Eugene and tells him he shouldn't pick fights with his big brother because they're all one family under one roof. The word family catches Eugene off guard again, and he gets somber, finally asking why he's being considered part of this family. Shaun quickly reminds him that they eat together and sleep under the same roof. The woman agrees and pats Eugene, saying that since he's living here, he's already part of the family. Just then, someone knocks on the door, calling out to see if anyone is inside. The mother goes to answer and, upon opening the door, finds a young high school girl. Well, or should I say, Rachel in disguise. Anyway, she greets the lady as Mother, apologizes for arriving so early, and introduces herself as Marie, Eugene's older sister. Rachel, in her Marie disguise, thanks the mother for taking care of Eugene. Shaun peeks over and asks who's at the door. The mother tells him Eugene's sister has arrived to pick him up. Shaun recognizes who this sister really is, so he steps outside to greet her. He asks Rachel what brings her here, and she simply says she's here to pick Eugene up. Rachel drops the little sister act and cheekily explains that she's there to take the boy back for the woman's safety. As agreed, Shaun then asks if she's the one who ordered Eugene to kill the mother. Rachel leans in and whispers that it was just a temporary order from her, and there's nothing to worry about. Shaun tells her, first of all, to put away the knives she's hiding before saying that. She tells our boy not to worry and reassures him that as long as he cooperates, there's nothing to fear. Shaun is a bit creeped out by how casually she's threatening him and asks what happens if he doesn't cooperate. Suddenly, Eugene bursts out with a big smile, asking why his sister took so long to get here. He hugs her right away, and she's all dramatic, showing her happiness at seeing him. But while she's being all cheerful, she quietly reminds Eugene that he's failed again and that the director will be pretty disappointed. Eugene snaps at her, asking if she's playing dumb or something. He explains that he hasn't ditched his mission, he's just trying to blend in with these people as family before making his move against the woman. He reminds her that the mother is guarded by the legendary hand of the dead mansion. He might look like an unattractive dumb monkey, but he's no ordinary Joe. In fact, he has fought Shaun many times and failed miserably each time. Rachel agrees, saying he really does look like a kind of fool monkey. She apologizes for messing up his operation, but reassures him there's nothing to worry about right now. They're ditching their current mission and heading back to the dead mansion right away. As Rachel extends her hand, the boy grabs it quietly, ready to leave with her. They announce they're heading out, and while Rachel shakes hands for a final goodbye, the little boy turns his head, telling her to let's go, probably because he doesn't want to look at the mother. He starts walking away with her. Just then, the mother calls out to Eugene, smiling and telling him to come back next time, and promises to make him an omelet just for him. The little one looks back at the mother with a touch of admiration, offering a faint smile and a simple nod to show he heard her. The mother then tells Shaun to make sure to visit again with Eugene. She promises to cook up something nice for them both. Shaun agrees and says he'll definitely bring Eugene along next time. The next day, we're at the school principal's office. The principal starts by apologizing for the delay, explaining that the school had to go through several committees to decide on the punishments, which took some time. He gives her the good news that the perpetrator's parents have promised to cover the damages, and all the offending kids will be suspended. The woman listens quietly, and when the principal shows her the file listing all the perpetrators, she's stunned to see a familiar face, and she quickly asks what the hell Shaun's photo is doing in the file. Let's turn our attention to the dead mansion, and check what's up with this unhinged organization. Inside, the director was on a call, receiving the rundown of what happened to Rachel's mission, and he sounded pissed. Back in her everyday undisguised look, Rachel could only apologize to her boss. She explained that she ordered Eugene to kill the old woman, but that plan did not pan out as it was supposed to. Rachel attributed the failure to the kid being a defective and useless product incapable of killing an old woman. He's a dud who can't even carry out an order properly. The director halted Rachel's angry rant, steering the conversation to what he really wanted to hear. He had already handed down the order to retrieve Eugene and leave the old woman alone, and yet she still went crazy and ordered the kid to eliminate the poor woman. From the director's perspective, Rachel is the one failing to carry out the mansion's orders properly, and you really don't want to disobey this man. She insisted that the only thing she failed at was retrieving Shaun. However, the director placed great importance on promises regardless of who the promise was made to. That's just his principle. With a crazed look, the director preached that before God, there should only be faith and trust. Everything else aside from those is heresy. However, there are still good children who lack faith. He had no choice but to create the controlling measure called the 3 principles. So, Rachel must remember the consequences of uncontrolled and unexpected events from the past. Orders, principles, and promises. These are the absolute rules of Dead Mansion. Hearing the director's preaching over the phone, Rachel's faith was stoked. But she was still concerned about the retrieval of Sean. They can't give up so easily. The director has other plans for that in the near future, though. There are many ways to handle that matter without directly touching the old woman and making an enemy out of Sean. Mary, who posed as Eugene's sister, had already started the operation using her multiple smartphones. The very next day, Sean went to school as usual. He looked deathly tired and bored, and the lectures had not even started yet. He noticed that some of his classmates were looking at him differently. There were hints of fear and vigilance in their eyes. Walking to his seat, he casually asked his seatmate what was up and why everyone was acting so weird. Maybe people are just on edge for an exam he didn't know about. Seeing as his seatmate was tight-lipped, Sean got a little frustrated. The first ones to talk to him were the big bastards sitting in the last row of the class. They wanted to know if what they heard about Park Chyon was for real. It turned out that Mary had already propagated photos of Sean choking out Hyunho. It was a pretty blatant piece of evidence that he was a bully. He could quickly tell that this was a low-quality photoshopped image, but for untrained eyes, it probably looked real. When asked where they got the pictures, the big bastards at the back of the class seemed reluctant to spill. After a few seconds of thinking, the 3 big bastards lowered their heads to apologize, admitting that they were wrong all this time. There were rumors going around that Park Chyon beat up Joseph, taking the guy on as an underling. This ridiculous rumor had already spread all over the school. They were saying that Joseph was terrified of Chyon. There were even reports of him being friends with gangsters. They had all the pictures to back it up, and these photos were going too far. Word is that Chyon ordered Joseph to take care of that Hyunho kid in the first place. Hearing that last bit of rumor made his stomach turn. What are these people talking about now? He tried to vehemently deny any involvement with the tragedy that Hyunho went through, but no one believed his words. Just like that, his name was dragged through the mud in just a single night. No matter how badly he wanted to deny the allegations, no one would believe him. It also attracted the attention of the wrong crowd, like the big bastards in the back row. They were shoving and pushing people around Chyon, trying to suck up to the new big dog in town. The big bastard even threatened an innocent bystander to shut up or end up like Hyunho. Hearing those threats, Chyon stepped in to clamp the bastard's heavy hand. Chyon laughed, playing it off like he was trying to hide his involvement. He then invited the big bastard Sumjin outside to give them the real story of what actually happened. The other classmates were visibly fearful and disgusted by his words and demeanor. But this was the only way he could control the situation. Dead Mansion is really putting him through social torture. He let all the thugs out of the room with the same lackadaisical attitude he always had. As soon as they got far enough, the classroom erupted with muted discussions regarding Park Chyon's behavior. With the attack on his image under